All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first session of Hall of Brilliance Academy free class. So I'm your host tonight. I'm Dr. Frank, as you formerly know me as. I'm the CEO of Hall of Brilliance Academy. And once again, welcome to Hall of Brilliance Academy free class. So tonight we're going to be talking about concepts of cell, which is under the subject biology. I'm going to be teaching it on the basis for preparation towards maybe your WAEC exam and your JAM or your NECO, as the case may be. So I'm going to be teaching it from all angles, and I am sure your pens and paper are also ready. Okay, so let's begin. Now, as you can see on your screen here, these are what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the meaning of cell, the history of cell structure, differences between plant cell and animal cell, and lastly, the cells as living units. So quickly, let's dive into the first case, the meaning of cell. Now, I am able to bring out two simplest and commonly known meanings of cell. Now, we have cell as the basic structural and functional unit of life that is capable of carrying out all living activities. And it can also be classified as the smallest, simplest, and basic unit of life also. Now, cell exists in different shapes and sizes. It can be round, it can be square, it can be rectangular, it can be star-shaped. All these can be seen with the use of a microscope. So when you view a particular cell under a microscope, you'll be able to see all these characteristics that I'm talking about. Now, when they say cell is the basic structure and functional unit of life, they are telling you that every living being, every living thing possess this thing called cell. And every form of activity such as respiration, nutrition, excretion, all these characteristics of living things begins from the cell level, of which we are going to be going deeper as we proceed. So that's the case for the meaning of cell. Now, on our next list, we're going to be talking deeply on the history of cell. So I was able to bring out a summary of the history of cell, but on each of these summaries, I'm going to be talking deep in each of them. So who discovered cell? It was a British scientist known as Robert Hooke in 1665. Now, Robert Hooke is an English natural philosopher and a polymath who discovered cell in 1665 while examining a thin slice of cork under a microscope. Now, during his study of this cork is a part of a plant, okay? It's a part of a plant cell. So during his study of this slice of cork under his microscope, he discovered a pattern of tiny box-like structures. Hence, he used the word cell to describe this tiny box. So he was the first man to use that word cell. And in Latin, it is called cellule, which means small room. So he also published his findings in a book called Micrographia in the same 1665 with a detailed illustration of these cork cells that he discovered. So as you can see, it was Robert Hooke who laid foundation about the discovery of cell. All right. So having known this, we move on to the next form of history of cell, which is in 1838 about a German botanist called Matthias Schleiden, who carried out an observation on plant structures. Now, Matthias Schleiden, his full name is Matthias Jacob Schleiden. He was also a German botanist who studied plant anatomy and cell theory. Now, he worked as a professor of botany, University of Dorpat. I'm sure all this history does not concern you, but you just have to know it. And I'm sure as you note it down, you are learning also. So he also published a book titled Betrayal Phytogenesis. Now, he described this plant structure, plant cell structure in this his discovery, in this his book. And he was the one that discovered that in plant cells, they have nucleus, and he called this nucleus cytoblast. Okay. He was the one that studied plant cells and discovered that plant cells possesses a nucleus, and he called it a cytoblast. Okay. He also observed that plant cells are surrounded by cell wall and have a clear cell sap. It has a clear cell sap. Later on, we're going to be talking about the different organelles of cell as we proceed with the class. But you should also note who was the one that discovered the true structure of plant cell, and his name is Matthias Schleding, a German botanist. Okay, so moving on, we move on to another German scientist who is known as Theodor Schwann in 1839. He's actually He's actually a physiologist. He was the one that did a study on animal cells under a microscope. Okay. He was the one that showed the discovery of animal cells under a microscope. And in his discovery, he discovered the cell membrane. He discovered the cell membrane and the presence of nucleus in the cell. So this was discovered by a German scientist called Theodor Schwann in 1839. Now, moving on to the next history, in 1855, another German botanist, biologist, Rudolf Virchow, who stated that cells come from pre-existing cells. And he used a particular statement in describing this, his discovery. He used the phrase, which I go, omnis cellula is cellular. It is actually a German word, omnis cellula is cellular, which means every cell comes from a cell. He emphasizes on this, and this became a theory. It became a theory of cell, that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Also, his research also contributed to discovery of pathology, in this case now cellular pathology. He also discovered cancer and inflammation, and he also showed how the cancer and inflammation occurs, and it all begins from the cell stage. Like I said, every characteristics of a living being begins from the cellular stage. Okay, so let's move on to the last person on my list, which is Volmar. In 1846, he published the works of Félix Dujardin, a French scientist, that all cells have a content called protoplasm. Later on, I will be talking about what this protoplasm is, and you should now know who actually discovered this protoplasm, and his name is Félix Dujardin. All right, next on my list is the cell structure. The cell structure. Now, as you can see on my screen here, we have a typical cell diagram. We have a typical cell diagram. All right, before we talk about the cell structure, we'll need to talk about the cell theory. Now, there are four cell theory, and it's very simple to understand. The first cell theory states that all living things are composed of one or more cells. As you are a human or a plant, as long as you're a living thing, you are made up of more than one cells in your body, which together forms tissues. And these same tissues again are more than one, which comes together to form organs. And these same organs are multiple in numbers, which comes together to form a system. Hence, that is the organization of life aspect, and that is another topic on its own in biology. But as the case may be, that is the first theory of cell. Now, the second theory states that the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life, just as the definition states, every living activities begin from the cell level. And the third theory states that all cells come from pre-existing cells by division. So take note of that. Every cell comes from pre-existing cells by the division process. And the last but not the least is a cell contains information for its structural and functional development in its nucleic acid. Hence, we know it as DNA or RNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid or ribonucleic acid, as the case may be. So every cell possesses that genetic information in its nucleic acid. All right. So moving on, we're going to be talking about the cell structure. So as you can see on the screen, we have a typical diagram of a cell. We have a typical diagram of a cell. Um, is the cell is made up of living materials, which we call it protoplasm. The first person that made use of this word is Felix Dujardin in his research, as I told you earlier on. So this protoplasm is made up of two things. Now, what are these two things? It is made up of the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Now, if you look at the diagram, you are going to locate the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Now, the nucleus is what is carrying the genetic information of that particular cell. Then the cytoplasm is a jelly-like structure. As you can see, the blue coloration in this diagram is the cytoplasm. So this cytoplasm, what is its function? It helps to hold all the other organelles such as the lysosomes, as you can see on the diagram, centrioles, the microtubules, the Golgi apparatus, the endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, chromatin, and the rest. So this cytoplasm helps to hold together all these organelles in its position in that particular cell. Okay, so that is just the function of this cytoplasm. So as I earlier stated, a cell contains living materials called the protoplasm, and the protoplasm contains two things, which include the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Okay, having known that, we're going to be talking about the function of each of these organelles in this particular cell. So I'm going to start with the cilia. Now you can see the cilia is a long finger-like structure around this particular cell. Now, this cilia is said to be used for movement by this cell, is said to be used for movement. And moving on, we'll be talking later on the example of cell organism that possesses this cilia. Okay, we're going to be talking about that later on. Now, the next one I'm going to be talking about is the lysosome. Now, what is the function of the lysosome? Now, the lysosome helps to digest and transport materials out of the cell. Okay? The lysosome helps to digest and transport materials out of the cell. Now, the lysosome is something that is said to be the All right, moving on, we have the next one, which is the centrioles. The centrioles is a cylindrical-like structure which helps in cell division. It helps also in cilia formation. As you can see, the cilia is around this particular cell. It helps in ciliary formation. It also helps in cell signaling and maintaining cell organization and polarity. Okay, so that's the function of the centrioles. Now, the basic function of these microtubules in this particular cell is for actually organizing these other organelles in this cell. As you can see, it helps to maintain the cell shape, and it also helps to separate the chromosomes during the process of cell division. It helps in separating the chromosomes. Okay. Now, the next one we have on our list here is the Golgi apparatus. It can also be called the Golgi bodies, as the case may be. Now, what is the function? It aids in the synthesis, or you can say it aids in the formation of lysosomes. It also helps in packaging and distribution of materials around the cell. So that is actually the main function of the Golgi apparatus. Now, the next on our list is the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, we have two kinds of endoplasmic reticulum. As you can see, we have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum and we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now, what is now the difference between these two endoplasmic reticulum? Now, the difference between the two endoplasmic reticulum is that the rough endoplasmic reticulum contains more ribosome. Later on, we're going to talk about what is the function of this ribosome, but take note of it that the rough endoplasmic reticulum contains ribosome, while the smooth endoplasmic reticulum lacks ribosome. And what is now the general function of this endoplasmic reticulum? The endoplasmic reticulum helps in distribution of proteins and other materials throughout the cell. Okay, so that's just the main function of the endoplasmic reticulum. It helps in the distribution of proteins around the cell. Okay, so moving on, we have the mitochondria. The mitochondria is where all forms of energy activities are taking place. Energy activities such as respiration, that's the main energy activity taking place. So where respiration occurs is the mitochondria. Okay, you can also say it is a site where chemical activities also occur. So that's just it. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, as we've already talked about it before, is the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is a jelly-like structure that holds all these other organelles together. That's just the general function. And the nucleolus is a part of the nucleus. As you can see, this is the nucleus, but there is a nucleolus. So it's a subunit of the nucleus. It's inside of this nucleus. It also holds the genetic information of every cell. Then we have the chromatin. Now, the chromatin is only found in animal cells. So we can definitely say that this cell structure that we have on this our screen is the chromatin. Now, what is the function of this chromatin? Yeah, the chromatin is a DNA structure. It helps in packaging of DNA. It helps in protecting of DNA. It just helps in generally just a protective structure that helps to protect the DNA of a nucleus. Okay. Then we have the ribosome, which I promised to talk about. So, what is now the function of the ribosome? Now, the function of this ribosome is that it holds protein materials. It helps to hold protein materials of a cell. Then lastly, we have the nuclear membrane. Now, the nuclear membrane helps to hold the whole nucleus together. So it's like a wall. It's like a wall which helps to hold the whole nucleus together, as you can see. Then I skipped the cell membrane. So you can see that the cell membrane is also a wall. It helps to give shape to that particular cell, and it is possessed by only an animal cell, while the plant cell possesses um the cell wall. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about the next thing quickly. All right, so the next thing on my list here is the differences between plant cell and animal cell. Okay, so as you can see, we have that the plant cell possesses cellulose cell wall, while the animal cell possesses, okay, lacks cellulose cell wall. Now, in this case, we have it that the plant cell possesses cell wall. That's the main thing here. While the animal cell possesses what we call cell membrane. As you can see from the previous diagram, you can see that that was a typical animal cell. So the animal cell is said to possess a cell membrane and not a cell wall. Now, plant cell possesses plastids, while animal cell lacks plastids. Then large vacuole is present, while small vacuole is either present or absent. So take note that vacuole is always present in a plant cell. So whenever you see a plant cell structure and maybe it's not properly labeled as a plant cell, one way to identify that that is a plant cell is the presence of a large vacuole. So another way to identify if that is an animal cell is if it has a small vacuole or it lacks a vacuole. So you can definitely identify that as an animal cell. Then another feature again of the plant cell is that it is rigid while the animal cell is flexible. And one thing you should never forget is this line, as you can see. Plant stores glucose as starch, while animal stores glucose as glycogen. So take note of that. Plant cell stores glucose as starch, while animal cell stores glucose as glycogen. Then centrosome is absent in plant cell, while centrosome is present in animal cell. So that is another way of identifying a plant cell or an animal cell. Then the last on our list is cell as a living unit. Now, cell exists as an independent, single, and free living organism, and it also exists as a colony, it exists as a filament, it exists as part of a multicellular organism. So I'm going to take a few minutes of the time to discuss on each of these parts or each of these living units. Now, when they say cell exists as independent, single, and free living organism, we are talking about it existing as either a plant-like or an animal-like. Now, I'm going to show you some typical examples. Now, this is a cellular organism called Chlamydomonas. Now, as you can see, the Chlamydomonas possess a structure called flagella. Now, this structure helps for its movements. Hence, it can also be regarded as a animal-like cell, an animal-like cellular organism. Now, what makes it a plant-like cellular organism is that it possesses a unique structure called chloroplast, and chloroplast is only possessed by plant-like organisms. Okay, so this makes it a plant-like organism, this chloroplast it possesses. Now, this means that it can synthesize its own food with the aid of sunlight, and as the case may be, that process is called photosynthesis. So it can photosynthesize. Then what makes it an animal-like is because it can move from one place to another. Hence, the other parts of it are just the same. Then another one we can discuss about is the amoeba protozoa. This is just a typical animal-like organism in the cellular stage. And amoeba is shapeless, as you know. It possesses typical structures, organelles, sorry, such as the cell membrane. It possesses the ectoplasm and the endoplasm, which is the two parts of the cytoplasm. So the ectoplasm is the outside part of the cytoplasm, while the endoplasm is the inner part of the cytoplasm. Then definitely it must possess a nucleus. Then it possesses a unique structure called a pseudopodium. A pseudopodium is what helps it to move from one place to another. Okay, it's like its leg, it helps it to move. Then it possesses the contractile vacuole, which is used for its excretion process. It has granules, it has food vacuole, which this is like its mouth. That's what it helps to feed. Okay, so these are um organisms that exist in free as a free living organism in the cellular stage. We also have the Paramecium chordatum. It's also another animal-like cellular organism. What makes it an animal-like is because of this unique structure called cilia, or sorry, it's called cilia or pellicle. Now the pellicle is this inner finger-like structure, as you can see, while the cilia is this outer longer-like structure which helps for its movement. Then other organelles which it possesses makes it an animal-like. And you can see its unique structure is a slipper-like shape. It is described as a slipper-like shape. Okay, so that is the paramecium chordatum. Then we have next on our list the Euglena viridis. The Euglena viridis is also another algae-like cellular organism. It is animal-like in nature, and it also exists in a free living state. It possesses the flagellum, which helps for its movement. It has eye spots. It has the Golgi apparatus. It also possesses a chloroplast, which makes it a plant-like organism, as the case may be. So it can synthesize its own food and also move from one place to another. Then we have the second, which is the volvox. Now, the volvox exists as a colony. So this is one single volvox, and this is a colony of volvox. So you can see that one single of it possesses a flagella, just like the Chlamydomonas. It's like an algae-like structure. So it just exists in a colony. It does not exist on its own. So this is a colony of volvox. Okay, so we also have the Spirogyra, which is a typical example of cell as a filament. So this is a typical example of cell as a filament. You can see how it exists as a filament. You have the cell wall, which makes it a plant. We have the cytoplasm. We have the cytoplasmic strand. We have the cell membrane, which now makes it as an animal-like. So you can see that it is a mixture of both an animal-like and a plant-like. So that is just a summary of today's class. Thank you very much, and thanks for participating. If you have any questions, please simply drop it in the comment section below this video. Have a good night's rest.